After making their way up to the top of the farm system rankings, the talk around Major League Baseball has been about the Pirates slipping, and I kind of wanted to have a discussion with someone who is much more knowledgeable than I am, much more experience of ranking prospects, to kind of maybe figure out where some of this is coming from. Bringing back, I believe for the second or third time here, I'm bringing in from MLB Pipeline at Jonathan Mayo. Also, for those of you that don't know, Jonathan wrote a book, and there's a flash sale, I believe, on the audio recording that's out there that is Smart, Wrong, and Lucky. The origin stories of baseball's unexpected stars. Jonathan, how you doing today, sir?
I'm doing okay. Thanks for the plug.
Oh, absolutely not a problem. For those of you that haven't, I ordered it for my brother-in-law for his. I don't know if it was for his birthday or something, and we usually pass the books back and forth, and I haven't gotten it back yet, so I definitely will be reading it. But we're going to be talking about the Pirates farm system today. I mean, obviously, there's been some updates to the top 100s, to the top 30 prospects, different things around the Pirates system. But I mean, I don't want to generalize here, but if you could speak possibly a little bit about maybe like how you guys, rank farm systems, because a lot of times when there's trades that have happened, people will say, oh, well, we traded the number 3 prospect, 19 prospect, and 17 prospect. And that's what it should look like across another, farm system. Not every farm system is graded or created equally. So I kind of want to like maybe talk through the process of like general farm system rankings, and how that happens.
Sure, sure. Yeah, and I think that first point you made is an important one. If the Pirates trade a prospect to the Marlins, say, chances are that where he was ranked on the Pirates top 30 is not going to be the same as where he's ranked in on the Marlins. Although the Marlins have kind of revamped their entire system, but just in terms of strength of farm system wise, right? So yeah, your point is exactly right. The number 12 prospect on the Pirates at the start of the season would not be 12 on the Marlins or say the A's. They'd be a top 10 prospect, top 5, depending on how they slot in. So that's first and foremost. When we do our farm system rankings, it's all an inexact science, but in some ways it's even more inexact than looking at individual players, because there's so many different things I think that go into figuring out how to rank a farm system. Having elite level prospects helps. So teams that have a ton of top 100 guys or guys at the very top, that's a good thing. But it's also about depth and strength of overall system. So you may have a team that has, a couple top 20 guys in the top 100, but the rest of the system kind of tails off. Then they're not going to rank as high as a team that maybe has, a good amount of top 100 guys, but their top 30 is a lot more robust. So, and then when we do the re-ranking that we just did, it's after the trade deadline, it's after the draft. Guys have graduated to the big leagues, and we replace guys once they get past that rookie threshold of 130 at bats or 50 innings on the mound or 45 service days. So all those variables figure into how we kind of stack up the farm systems. And then myself and Jim Callis and Sam Dykstra rank them on our own, and then we'll combine them together and talk it over and tweak them if as we see fit.
And I think a piece of that with the Pirates farm system is, I mean, I think that everybody knew that they were going to take, a little bit of a hit, especially, in the re-rankings, and we didn't know how soon it was going to happen with, the graduations of, Paul Skeens, Jared Jones, who had emerged last year, Henry Davis losing his prospect ranking, Nick Gonzalez. I mean, there's a number of guys that have fallen out of that. And there have been some guys that have, maybe replaced them to a degree, but not to that level. I mean, Bubba Chandler's had an absolutely amazing season, but obviously people aren't going to look at him in the same way that you look at a Paul Skeens, at least, not on the surface, because I mean Paul Skeens is one of one. I mean, I haven't really seen a guy since I've been watching baseball that's like that. But the Pirates farm system, even without Skeens being in there, was always seen as a system that had depth. And now it kind of seems like, yeah, there's a system that has depth, but it's at like one particular place, and that is on the mound, and not really at the plate anymore. Is that really where the Pirates have maybe fallen off in the past couple of years here?
I think it's a combination of those things in terms of where they ended up. And they're kind of in an interesting position because maybe we'll put a pin on this for later. They do have some intriguing position players a little bit lower down who next year, if those guys take a step forward, the Pirates could be moved back up into the top half, top 10, where they've kind of been sitting for a while. But yeah, I mean, anytime you lose Paul Skeens, you're going to drop a little bit. It just kind of stands to reason. But then they also lost Jared Jones, who was a top 100 guy. Bubba Chandler, especially what he's been doing in AAA, like honestly, if we were to vote again on the top 100, he probably would move up some more just based on what he's been doing. But when we set that, I think we probably set that order. I don't remember the exact timing of things. He may have just been promoted to AAA, so we didn't. And not that you take too much from a few starts, but when the guy gets moved up and he's that young and he's that dominant, you tend to be like, oh, okay, well maybe he's reaching that next level that we all sort of thought that Bubba Chandler could reach just because of his athleticism. So he certainly helps fill a little bit of that void. But so I think it's those graduations, and then some of the I won't say lesser prospects, but not as highly ranked prospects who've been graduated. A couple of them they traded, and the fact that you're right, the hitters in the system have not taken the steps forward that you would like to see, universally. I think there's been struggles all around. I mean, it's encouraging that Tamar Johnson performed well enough for the last month and change to get bumped up to Altoona, and he'll sort of get his feet wet there, and we'll get to see what he can do there. But he's not been, and I'm a Tamar Johnson fan, and I still believe in him, but he's not been as good as I think people hoped he would be, especially given how he ended last year and the spring training he had, and then he got off to another slow start this year. But other than him, there's not been those younger hitters who are still have the chance to turn things around. Nobody's sort of jumped up to take their game to that next level where you think you're talking about Bubba Chandler who's rapidly improved, or even a guy like Thomas Harrington who's really taken a step forward on the mound as well. There aren't hitters who fit that description based on what they've done, at least this year.
And one thing that I think I may have asked you about this previously. I'm not exactly sure. I've asked at least somebody about this. Is when you're ranking, the newly drafted players, like like the Connor Griffin, you're looking at like a Wyatt Sanford, different things like that. A lot of times, I believe that you're probably ranking a lot of that based on potential and on their ceiling and different stuff like that. And we talk about, players with high ceilings and high floors, and high ceilings and low floors and different stuff like that. And I feel like that in the past, uh, I think Ben Cherington, especially when he first came along, was praised for going for those kind of high ceiling guys, but we didn't know what the floors would be, like like a Liover Peguero. Obviously, has not come to fruition as well as we would want it to. He's been hot for the past couple weeks, but still only barely has above a 700 OPS in AAA for the season. So I guess it's like almost like a two-part question: is that how difficult is it to put those new prospects, not only that have been drafted, but then also traded for like it is in Nick York, into a system. And then also, like, how do you maybe temper expectations with players that have such a high ceiling, and where you rank them.
Yeah, I find figuring out where to put the draft guys to be very difficult. And people ask us all the time because there'll be times where, like within the top 100, we'll flip guys compared to where we had them on the draft rankings, and they're like, "Well, how can that be?" And I was like, because it's not a science. It's we flipped. I think we ended up putting Charlie Condon ahead of Travis Bazzana, and people were outraged. Um, you know, as if we were committing some kind of felony. And the fact of the matter is, they were 1 and 1A and very interchangeable. So I think the same thing can happen within a team top 30. Now, the top guy, you usually can figure out, where someone belongs. And listen, we talk it over. There are people within the Pirates organization that I run the list by, and then I usually run it by someone externally who hopefully has looked at the draft guys. The trade guys, it's a little bit of guesswork because uh, I don't do all 30 farm systems. We split them up. But, I had mentioned Jim Callis and Sam Dykstra, and we split the league in thirds. And I don't, so you don't always have a full handle of what that farm system they're coming from looks like, but you can get a handle. Talk to my colleagues, talk to people in the industry. But it's so there's a little bit of guesswork, and then you have to go and see them play. Obviously Nick York comes over and hits a ton when he comes over. That's certainly encouraging. But I think we sort of more or less had them in the right place. If you're lucky, there's someone within the organization, or even if someone outside the organization has a feel for, especially with the draft guys, both the amateur side and the pro side. That makes our jobs easier. Otherwise, you have to kind of, talk to someone here, talk to someone there, and try to extrapolate from it. But it's, I don't want to call it guesswork, because I don't want to sort of diminish the work that goes into it. But there's a lot of estimating. You can't really be sure whether Nick York should be 5 or 6, or where should Termarr Johnson drop further because of the year he had. Should Connor Griffin be ahead of Bubba Chandler? Not what the year Bubba Chandler's had, but there were certain X amount of organizations we ended up having where the top draft pick ended up being their number one prospect. And there were a couple that were like, oh, they could be 1, they could be 2. How do you want to decide to do that? And then we adjust, right? Not all the draftees will go out and do much this summer. So it may just be based if they go to Instructs and the better feel an organization has for those guys can help us inform where we rank them for our preseason 2025 lists.
And I guess like going off of that just a little bit, but also kind of like my head, I'm just, as you're talking there, I'm sitting there thinking, about the number of like young players that Ben Cherington has used to kind of like backfill the system a little bit. York and Billy Cook were a little bit of a away from that because you needed to fill towards the top of the system as well. And you spoke about if some of these younger guys end up coming out and like having better seasons next year, or kind of break out or whatever it may be. It definitely seems like the Pirates have a decent amount of young guys there. The question I was thinking of while you were talking about that is, where do these ETAs come from? Like where does that, is that like you're talking about that? I don't want to put you on the spot with that too much, Jonathan. You gave me a little bit of a funny look there, but um, but that's where like I'm starting to think like is it we just have a lot of guys. I'm looking up and down the ETAs as like 2026, 2027, 2028. I mean, it's a lot of guys that are pretty far away. So I guess maybe I'll make the question a little bit easier for you, is that if there's guys that are further away, like you have a system like this that has a lot of guys that are further away, as opposed to guys that can make an impact on the team in like 2024 and 2025. Does that have an impact on the grading or the rating as well?
Not too much. I mean, I think if you're kind of breaking ties or whatever, because overall, I think our general philosophy isn't who's got the best guys who are going to be in the big leagues now, right? Because just because you have a lot of guys who might be able to contribute in the major leagues this year or even say the beginning of next year doesn't mean they're going to be the best players. It's the way I always kind of frame it when we're trying to rank players, within a system, within our top 100, is we're trying to rank them based on who are going to be the best major leaguers 5, 8, 10 years from now. We're looking into the future. We mentioned ceiling. What is their ultimate ceiling? Are there guys that we rank whose ceiling is not as high as someone else's and they have that really high floor? Yes, because there's a little more confidence that they're going to get to that highest level of production that we think they're capable of. And I think the ETAs, again, there's some guesswork there. And like in general, let's say for this year's draft class, for the most part, if you were a college player from this year's draft class, we put 2027 as the ETA. If you're a high school player, we put 2028. And then we adjust, right? And then there are exceptions. We thought Jackson Holiday, the Orioles, might be able to move a little bit faster than some high school players, and so maybe we shaved a year off when we first. I don't remember what we did when we first. And obviously, we had no idea he was going to go from low A to triple A in his first full season, then be in the big leagues this year. But we adjusted that ETA as time went on. So when we started the year with our preseason rankings, his ETA was 2024 because it was clear that at some point this year he was going to reach Baltimore. So that it's always a bit of a sliding and moving target in terms of that. And that's, there are often times where we have it wrong in both directions, where we think a guy's going to get there quickly and it takes a lot longer. I mean, we see that all the time. And then vice versa, where the guys get to the big leagues in a hurry. Certain organizations move guys quicker, certain college guys, especially college hitters, we won't, I think we had a lot of the college hitters from this class with 2026 ETAs. The Angels move guys super fast. So Christian Moore, I think, had a 2025 ETA, things like that. So we have a sort of framework that we use, at least for the draftees. The international guys who just signed, say in January, I believe we were using 2029 as an ETA, which is not a real year. It's not, that doesn't seem like it's something we should be talking about, but it is. But even that may be being too aggressive. If they're say 16 or maybe they're just 17 now, that means they're getting in the big leagues at 21 or 22, which is happening, a lot more often. And but that doesn't, is far from automatic. So we adjust those, frequently when we redo our rankings.
Yeah. And while I have you on here, I was thinking about, like, we're talking about guys that are close to the major leagues, and there's been a discussion, at least around, around Pirates X or Pirates, social media, whatever it may be, about the gap between AAA and the major leagues this year. I was just kind of curious on your end with the guys that you talk to and stuff out there, scouts, whoever it may be. Have they been also talking about, like, performance in AAA this year? A guy that's maybe tearing it up or something, it may not have, the same impact as it's had in previous years, or it may not have the same shine, I guess. Just because, I mean, that's something that everybody keeps saying in Pittsburgh here is, well, the gap is so much bigger. The gap is so much bigger, especially, on the pitching side. People are saying that if a hitter is performing well, then, maybe, it's because, the pitching isn't as good in AAA this year. I just want to know if that's something that you've been hearing, because it's definitely something that has kind of been put out there to Pirates fans this season.
I haven't dug into each level and where the strengths and weaknesses are. I think, that's one of those things that's often cyclical, and it may just be that, the top pitching guys either, didn't touch AAA or breezed through so quickly and then made it to the big leagues. Or we're just hitting a little bit of a lull in terms of pitching, which I might lean more towards that as the theory, because when we just did this re-rank, I think it was the lowest amount of pitching prospects in the top 100 we've ever had. So No, obviously that's across all levels. As we're coming up on some replacements, we're going to be adding a few more pitchers, so it'll be a little bit more robust. But it does seem like we're in a little bit of a valley in terms of overall pitching prospects, and whether it's because of performance or injuries, or a combination of those two variables. I think that it's just right now a little bit low. So it may be that pitching everywhere isn't quite as good, and it gets separated out once you reach the upper levels, because there are guys who can get by with either completely blowing people away at the lower levels, and then they get to the upper levels and their lack of command gets them. Or the flip side of that coin would be guys who really know how to pitch without an out pitch, and at the lower levels they're good at keeping younger hitters off balance, that they have success, but the margin for error is small, so when they get to the upper levels it gets exposed more. So I think it's probably a combination of all of those things, but right now it's not, so without really answering your question specifically, because I just don't know, it wouldn't surprise me if that were the case, but it also might be the case if you really were to peek under the hood for any length of time at a number of levels right now.
Okay. Yeah, I was just really curious about that. And I just have one more question. It's kind of like a two-part question, but it should be a pretty quick answer for you. If you can go back into the little bit of a memory bank here is, like I said, when we just jumped on here, the Pirates, had, one of the top farm systems, at least for a few years, under Ben Sherrington here, but have kind of fallen out of favor. My question would be, is there, a farm system or an organization, at least in recent memory, that you could think, maybe falling out of favor so quickly? And then just kind of the other piece is that, are there other farm systems that are just getting better so much quicker? And it's just like you're talking about that cyclical nature of different things, or is it, the Pirates system has really fallen that far?
I don't think it's fallen that far. Again, we'll have to see, right? Like we talked about sort of at the outset, I think especially if some of these young hitters take steps forward, and then there were some encouraging things. Tamar Johnson's in Double A. Put the numbers aside. If someone had said, all right, end of 2024, he was going to be in Altoona, I think people would be like, okay, cool, that sounds right. Unless we were going to jump on a much faster track. And Mitch Jebb looked like he started to figure some things out after just a terrible start. Greensboro, it's hard to know how to figure out hitters there. But even the guys at the lower levels, especially a lot of the international signees, I think if they can take a step forward, and there have been glimpses of things that you could be bullish on them still if you wanted to be, but we're going to wait and see, because at a certain point in time you have to produce. But if those guys take steps forward, they're going to move right back up. So it's very much a cyclical thing. It's really hard to maintain a very good farm system all the time, whether you're winning at the big league level, especially if you're winning at the big league level. But in general, it's just so many things can happen. And for better or for worse, right now the Pirates have succeeded at developing pitching and not developing hitting as much. And there's a whole nother episode, we could sort of dig what's going on there, and I don't know that I have answers to that. But when that's the case, so much can go wrong with pitching. Injuries. Like Mike Burrows is a guy who probably would have been impacting the big league staff if he hadn't got, had Tommy John surgery. Things like that. There's a reason why there are a lot of people who feel like, oh, there's no such thing as a pitching prospect, because so much can go wrong. I think that because of that, there's so much variability there. So I do think it's more cyclical than anything else. And listen, Connor Griffin and and to a lesser extent Wyatt Sanford could go out and have really good years next year, and if they both sort of either move up the top 100, or Wyatt Sanford looks like the guy whose name was popping up in first round conversations. I mean, Levi Sterling, another one from this draft. You talk about the upside they drafted. He could take a huge step forward and be the next in the line of the Pirates pitching prospects. Then this sort of dip down to the closer to the bottom third of the farm system rankings will just be a blip on the radar, and they'll kind of be right back where they've been for the past several years.
Yeah, and on the first part, did you see a farm system that's taken a step back like this before?
Yeah, you're relying on my institutional memory, which is Swiss cheese at this point, man. So I'm sure there has. I mean, and but for different reasons, maybe I'm sure there are teams that traded a bunch of guys because they were trying to win. The San Diego Padres are often a yo-yo because AJ Preller, their general manager, will load up on prospects and then trade them all, seemingly a minute later. You think about they traded for Juan Soto, and then they traded Juan Soto away, and then they traded more guys this year. So that is often the reason for that pendulum. But I'm sure there are teams that have sort of slid down, and I use that. I don't want to speak too harshly. I don't think that the Pirates farm system is in real trouble. It's just that they haven't performed as well as expected, especially on the offensive side. And yes, there are some other systems that have performed better, and maybe they're had better overall drafts. Although I like the Pirates draft, I think they took a lot of upside up and down that draft. So they some of those guys who say had bad college years, like the Josh Hartles or the Will Taylors of the world, and they get them figured out. Then suddenly you're talking about, well, this is it's still a really fun top 30 to do. And when you're writing up the 30th guy and think this guy could still be a big leaguer, then it's still a pretty solid system overall, even if they've dropped in the rankings this go round.
Well, Jonathan, I definitely appreciate you jumping back on here, giving us your time. I'm pretty sure that anybody who listens to this is following Jonathan Mayo, but if you don't, go follow him. He's got a link there for, like I said, the book, the audio book, whatever you would want to do. Jonathan, thanks for jumping back on here and talking some Pirates and maybe giving us a little bit of hope because I mean we have to have hope.
No, absolutely. Don't give up.
Gotten to the point in the season where the top 5 Pirates prospects hasn't really been changing all that much, and we're seeing more and more familiar names pop up. So none of these should really be a surprise to anyone. As always, in no particular order, number 1, Carlson Reed. His last start on Friday, August 23rd. All he did in Greensboro was go 6 full innings, strike out 10 batters, walk only 1, gave up 1 hit, 0 earned runs in 4 games started for the Grasshoppers since being promoted. He has a 0.48 ERA, a 0.911 whip, over 18 and 2/3 innings pitched, 23 Ks, 7 base on balls, 0 home runs in the Sally League's very friendly hitter parks, and 1 earned run. Number 2, Alessandro Urcolani. He backed up Reed on Friday, completed that shutout. 3 innings pitched, 0 hits, 6 Ks, 1 walk, and 0 earned runs, as I previously mentioned. On the season as a starter, reliever, swingman, 70 innings pitched, 87 strikeouts, 24 walks, a 3.73 ERA, and a 1.114 whip. Number 3, Thomas Harrington, also pitched on Friday. A big day for the Pirate system this past Friday. Harrington for the Indianapolis Indians went 6 full innings, 6 Ks, 1 base on ball, 2 hits, 1 earned run. Thomas Harrington really does not walk a whole lot of batters whatsoever. 4 AAA starts so far, a 3.09 ERA, a 0.729 whip. Number 4, Tamar Johnson made some news. He's finally being promoted to Double-A Altoona, and it's not really finally because he did struggle for a while there at the beginning of the season, has started to hit more consistently. Since June 1st, over 285 plate appearances, a 128 WRC plus, a slash line of 263, 366, 425, with 10 of his 13 home runs on the season. Number 5, Nick York. Last week, he had a 187 WRC plus, a 1.071 OPS, 3 doubles, 0 home runs for Indy so far since being acquired, 10 on the season, over 91 plate appearances for the Indians, a 137 WRC plus, slashing 370, 422, 481. And there you have it, your top 5 Pirates prospects for this last week.
A pitcher of beer, a pitcher of beer, let's order another pitcher of beer. That pitcher of beer should come over here. I love that pitcher of beer.
We are still in Surfside Beach as far as the beer reviews go. Had a decent amount of craft beers while I was down there at the beach, at the pool. Went to the Total Wine and picked up some lighter beers that could be easy drinking throughout the day. We have Carolina Brewing's Costero Mexican Lager coming in at 4.5%. Give that one a 425, knock it down to 400. The Island Coastal Lager, give that one a 450, knock it down to 425. That one is also 4.5%. Steel Hands Brewing, the Sandstorm Game Day Lager, 4.5%. Noticing a pattern here, give that one a 425, knock it down to 400. And the Columbia Craft Carolinian American Style Ale, this one's 4.7%. Give that one a 450, knock it down to 425. Have one more day of beers here next time when we come back. With the last 3 beers that I had down there on the last couple of days, and 2 that I've had since I've been back up in Pennsylvania. But until next time, guys and gals, let's go Indians, let's go Curve, let's go Hoppers, and let's go Bradenton Marauders.